Welcome. Mr. Diller, thanks for having us in your building.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Hope you all like it. You've actually all been here more elapsed hours than I've been here. I've only been here for 3 or 4 days. And
He's been complaining about the painter upstairs.
I complain about everything, so don't worry about it. All I'm seeing is the flaws, you know. But nevertheless, I'm glad you're all here.
We have a simple topic, which is Web 2012, 5 years from now. And I'm not going to introduce our 3 panelists because you know who they are. In fact, you know who they are by their first names. Barry, Arianna, and Craig. Barry, let me start with you. A major part of your business is e-commerce. In 5 years, 2012, what's going to be different e-commerce on the web?
Well, people will be using it more than they use it now because they don't really use it all that much when you think about commerce. You talk about commerce, retailing, broadly. I mean, right now it's this tiny, tiny fraction. And the reason, of course, is that up until now we've been bandwidth constrained, and it's only recently that we're getting sufficient bandwidth to have it at all do the kinds of things that will make it doable ubiquitously by all sorts of people, young and old. Certainly right now and past years, Amazon, et cetera, things that are utilitarian or things in which the customer service, which has so well been worked out by Amazon, and some other product lines. But if you really think about commerce, the everyday thing of buying things, then you have to marry rich video, data, audio, movement, et cetera, because you're dealing with the screen. You know, so if you're dealing with the screen, screens are for when you're trying to do things other than gather information and other. They are about movement. They are about a kind of lively, rich interaction, particularly if you're offering goods or you want to entice people to do something that they had not thought about doing. So I think that in the next 5 years, as bandwidth naturally expands and as the tools get simpler, so the tools are still too hard. I mean, the idea that you have to go find a credit card, enter it in, do all of those little screens to get there, I mean, this will all have been already all done for you any place you go. So that natural evolution in the next years is going to be absolute, and therefore I think in the next years, I don't think it's all of 5, I think it's probably 3, but in the next years, I think that we will soar in the usage of the internet for commerce.
Arianna, news 5 years from now. How will it be different?
Well, first of all, the world we're going to be covering will be dramatically different. There are going to be 2 major parties, the Democratic Party and the Bloomberg Party. And the Republican Party will have become a niche party.
Well,
are you going to be miserable?
Very financed, well-financed.
One will be extremely well-financed.
Yes, that's
yes,
for certain.
You're going to have you can just imagine in 2012 we're going to be covering the Republican debate and all 10 candidates will not believe in evolution. And I think 3 of them will not believe in gravity. So that will be the future we are going to be covering. In terms of how we cover it, I think there are really going to be 2 ways to cover it, and I'm going to simplify it here. There's going to be the Huffington Post way and the New Yorker way. Everybody in between will be either extinct or will have to have moved to one camp or the other. The Huffington Post way will be real-time news as it happens, with an attitude, and at the same time, it will have moved to original reporting. It will be breaking stories, not just by having reporters, but by also the wisdom of the crowd mechanism, by having, as we are developing for the next election, reporters who are really citizen reporters all around the country, covering the campaigns, giving us morsels of information here and there, which combined together can become the next big story. For example, what Josh Marshall did by breaking the U.S. attorney scandal is going to be the way of the future. It was not broken through a deep throat encounter. It was broken because the users all around the country began to put together little pieces. So that attorney general was fired in Arkansas, and that one was fired in San Diego, and you put all that together and you have a scandal. So all those new ways of reporting are going to have become really the norm, and you're going to have them employed both by mainstream media and by online media. Basically, I believe by 2012 we'll have the hybrid future. This debate about is it going to be print or is it going to be online will seem unbelievably obsolete because it's going to be both. And those operations that are thriving will have combined the best of the old with the best of the new, a little bit like this building. You know, you don't reject what is great about the past. You can never reject editors. Editors will become more and more important. In fact, the more user-generated content there is, the more you have to have editors separate the wheat from the chaff. And you are not going to be eliminating fact-checking. On the contrary, you're going to be eliminating elements of all journalism that have not worked, like the excessive use of anonymous sources. You know, again and again, we give cover to people who are operating from one political aisle or the other just by allowing them to hide behind anonymity. That will no longer be accepted by 2012. Transparency will be the norm. And already we have mainstream journalists adopting it, like Adam Nagurny, who 4 years after he invented the term for the New York Times, the bread girl, to describe John Edwards, came out and told us how it happened, that in fact it had been fed to him. Not the exact term, but the idea of John Edwards being like a girl, by, you know, high officials in the Bush administration. We still don't know who they are, but we know it was intended to be fed to the New York Times, and it was fed successfully.
Will you be miserable without George Bush to kick around?
Oh, no, don't worry. There will
She'll always have somebody.
There will always be somebody to kick around, especially for, especially for operations like the Huffington Post that are not aligned to a particular party. You know, our goal is basically to expose hypocrisy wherever we see it, to expose malfeasance, and not to be partisan in the sense of only praising or only denouncing one particular party.
Craig Newmark, social networking. How will it be different 5 years from now?
In a way, it will be very similar to what we do already. The net is, from one point of view, a whole bunch of technology. And frankly, as a guy who grew up wearing a plastic pocket protector, I do love technology. But the web is not about technology. It's about people. It's made of people, not like Soylent Green is made of people, but basically the web is a whole collection of people working together with occasional individual voices which manage to capture, let's say the spirit of a movement. And now what we're seeing are people beginning to use the net for a number of purposes, working together in journalism, politics, even public diplomacy, and that's what's changing things at a faster rate than ever before. Used to be that a new technology, would advance the web. 500 years ago, the printing press was languishing, but then this guy, a blogger named Martin Luther, he created a killer app called the Reformation. Nowadays, we see that beginning to happen, again, with politics, with some of the people around the Dean campaign firing that whole effort off in a really big way. We're now seeing dramatic advances at this moment in terms of the presidential campaigns, candidates using the web to use social media to advance their campaigns in a big way. We're seeing dramatic developments week by week, like Barack Obama and then John Edwards calling for NBC to free the video of the presidential debates. We're seeing a lot of this stuff going on. We may see a major inflection point in New York in a couple weeks at the Personal Democracy Forum. The web.
What inflection point do you predict?
Well, right now at this conference, we're going to see a lot of the candidates, their internet coordinators and so on, coming together, and that's going to create, I think, a self-fulfilling prophecy where the net and the web in 2008 will play a major role, not just the conventional stuff like fundraising and all that, but we're going to see a lot more in terms of journalism and so on. People don't talk about other efforts, though, in the social web. I play a microscopic role in a Mideast peace movement focused on Palestine and Israel. The only thing unique about that is that these guys are actually going into both sides, asking people, what do you really want, which has never happened before. They're doing this in real life. They're doing it on the web. Again, asking people, what do you really want? The results are basically that people all over just want the same stuff, although they're convinced the other guys don't want that. This just illustrates that people are using the web for these social purposes like nothing's ever happened before. Again, a big surprise for me as a technology guy, but, I've been doing customer service for 12 years. I know people look at me and regard me mostly as eye candy. But these days, doing customer service even full time for 7 years, and in the trenches, and I see that ordinary people are getting power through this social web. Individual voices are starting to be heard loudly, and power is being redistributed from relatively small groups of people to large groups of people, and that's kind of what happened in the Reformation. Bloggers also like John Locke or Thomas Paine, they were involved in their own revolutions, which involved power flowing from small groups of people to slightly large groups of people. Something big is going to happen by 2012. We're going to see it.
Barry, one of the debates that takes place is in the video realm on the web, and this notion of, will user-generated content be as, like YouTube dines on, be as popular as produced content? You've expressed some views in the past about that. What's your view?
When you say produced content, you're talking about professionally made by people who, rather than having the cat throw up on the grandmother or whatever, which has a appeal, large or small. But I believe that that the talent pool is finite. I think there are only so many people who are capable of making programming or things that will resonate with a lot of people. I'm not talking about people who make things that are clever and that 1,000 or a few friends or their family or 1,000 people or whatever. And there are occasional spikes where somebody does something, and there's huge number of people who do it. But if you really think day in, day out, I think that again, what will happen is that these are very early days in video. I mean, these are the earliest possible days. So as it evolves, I think that the people who are trained to do this and who are professional at it will get in the mix of it. And I think that, of course, people will get discovered today. The extraordinary thing, I mean, the miracle of this box is, and no one, by the way, the interruption is, no one would have ever made up the system that way. This is a pure accident, that you push a button and publish to the world. I mean, there's nobody between you and everyone, presuming you can get people to know about it. But the idea of publishing to the world, frictionless, is an extraordinary development. So
but Barry,
the thing of discovery will be much advantaged.
But the
talent will out sooner than it would have before. But no more talent will be created. I don't believe.
But the product or the content companies that you've been associated with in your previous career opportunities are people who are fighting, say, with YouTube today, claiming that they're not being remunerated for the content they produce. Will that be worked out?
Well, they say something very reasonable. We made it, we own it, and we should be able to control who is going to distribute it. Now, yes, it will eventually be worked out, I think, absolutely. Again, this is like, you got to go back, when you think about this, to the Motion Picture Trust. I mean, there was a time, now about 100 years ago, when literally what went through what kind of looks like that camera, which was early film, that actually all of the cameras not the film, but all the cameras were owned by a thing called the Motion Picture Trust. And they actually said, well, you can do some through my camera, and you and nobody else. And that's how the movie business began. And it was not until 10 years later that that trust was broken. So we're having the similar, early days, but sure, it'll all work itself out.
Do you agree with Barry's notion, or do you think he's an elitist?
What I see...
Me, an elitist?
Oh, come on.
Compared
That's
to eye candy?
I'll be quoting you, by the way.
You should get something out of this.
You already have a girlfriend.
I prefer to be quoted. I prefer to be quoting Arianna, but that's a different. But I do see people who we would normally consider amateurs, who are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting in media and quality media today. I'm happy as long as the sound quality is good. I do focus mostly on the news aspect of things because I've been dragged into that. And right now, if you look at the way news is going, you'll see a spectrum from professional to citizen journalism, and you will see citizen journalists whose work is fact-checked better than some journalists who are professionals and everything in between.
What's your definition of citizen journalist? It's kind of a...
Citizen surgeon?
Yeah. I was going to go there next. But you didn't let me have the setup.
Okay, you go.
No. Citizen surgeon was the whatever. But what's the definition of citizen journalist?
I wanted to take away your punchline because it's
Thank you so much.
Because so often,
always count on you for this. But go ahead.
The idea of, that citizen journalists are like citizen surgeons, meaning that you can't do that. You can't do journalism without a degree or the sources or the access or all the things that make a journalist. And the truth is that, especially in the lead up to the war in Iraq, we saw professional journalists at their worst. And I think part of what has fueled blogging is not just technology, it's not just the fact that thousands, millions of people are doing it, but the fact that the mainstream media did it so badly during such a crucial time in history. And so as we're looking now at citizen journalists, we see that they're bringing something very different to the table than the professionals. The professionals are very often willing to sell their independence for access. And we saw that with Bob Woodward. We saw one of the greatest journalists of our time, who kind of invented investigative journalism, being completely taken in because he was given access and writing 2 books, which basically missed completely the story that we now know was going on at that time in terms of the misleading the American people in the lead up to the war. But
citizen journalists did not, at that time, were not out there on the other side of it.
Well, some were,
I mean,
but
nobody
not
knew
enough.
at that time.
No,
we all
that's not
thought,
true.
we all actually thought something that later turned out not to be so.
But it's not true that we all thought of that. And not just myself. If you go back to the whole time, we knew it wasn't true. And it's not because we were smarter. It's because we're looking at some data that others were overlooking, including data that Senator Bob Graham was...
well, let me give you an example. Knight Ridder,
Yeah.
2 guys from Knight Ridder.
Did a great job.
Who actually did classic journalism, did a fantastic job. Nobody's done as good a job as that who was on their own, because their process of journalism was call it a pro process, but it was a process that involved endless cross-checking, checking, and digging. You're a journalist. Your process of...
I don't feel like one here. I'm just listening.
Of reportage. Here you're an interviewer, honey. Your process of reportage, where you definitely have access, but you're endlessly out there checking and going back and forth and digging to try and get out the report.
But that begs the question, and it begs it to you, Arianna. Acknowledging what you said about the weaknesses of the press and weapons of mass destruction. If you look at, say, the New York Times in Iraq today, spending millions and millions of dollars, and having people like Dexter Filkins and John Burns, who are just classic great reporters, doing that, that takes a lot of money and resources. And if the Times, papers like the Times, don't start losing, as they are circulation and advertising, how do you support that kind of journalism? Because citizen journalists can't quite replicate a John Burns and a Dexter Phil.
Absolutely. That's why I keep talking about the hybrid future, that we will need both. We will need the resources, which increasingly may be resources that the online media have. You know, as online advertising is becoming increasingly paramount. Right now, only about 5.8% of advertising is online, but these numbers are going to be changing exponentially. Then more and more online sources will be able to have the kind of funding that you are talking about to do original reporting. But at the same time, we have, when Barry talks about what the Night Reader guys did, absolutely fantastic, no better reporting was done. But also you had bloggers who were taking their work and giving it wider currency. So it's not just doing their work, it's disseminating it. It's actually deciding which of the stories deserves to be on page one, which is a very different choice that different media organizations make, and that's part of what matters.
Okay.
Again, the distinctions, professional citizen journalists, are blurring together. I don't even know if I try to define them anymore, but we see real journalism popping up in unexpected places. The best example is one of the reporters I admire most on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. They just got an intern basically with a video recorder, and I think it was about a year ago they showed some just lying coming out from a very highly placed lobbyist who also holds very high office in this country. They just showed that he was lying about the whole thing. This, again, is nominally a comedy show, but they did a better job than anyone else. I'd like to add my favorite Oscar Wilde quote: "If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you."
Barry, let me ask you a question. Arianna mentioned advertising, and clearly the subscription model on the web has not been a sterling success.
Well, the Wall Street Journal.
No, but a sterling success.
It's been a great success.
There have been little deserts, oases
and
of
except
success.
for porn. You can charge for porn, especially weird porn. But otherwise, forget it.
So, How much?
A lot.
But then the question becomes, when you look at Google and YouTube and then the double whammy of DoubleClick and people saying, hey, they're worried that they will dominate the advertising marketplace of the web. Do you worry about that?
Sure. I mean, we're both a big advertiser on the web, probably actually the biggest. We spend over $200 million on web advertising. And we also, not the Google size, but we take in a lot of advertising, about $600 million. So we're on both sides of it. And there has to be, I mean, Google it now has about half practical market share of the internet in terms of usage, but far greater than that in terms of the liquidity of their advertisers. They have more advertisers more efficiently.
$10 billion.
So it is possible. There's no predictions here, really, but it is possible. If you just took the current trends and you saw how Microsoft is not at all competitive and continues to lose share, I mean, Microsoft is actually not really a player in search as we speak today, having spent gazillions amounts of dollars to do so. Yahoo is kind of held steady. We have little Ask.com, which is growing, but is half the size of actually Microsoft. Well, a little more than that now. But if you just project the trends, you would say that Google will wipe everyone out, because what happens is their efficiency is a virtuous circle, which means that the more efficient they are, the more they can spend in terms of making their advertising system more efficient, which makes other people's ability to compete with them much, much harder. You push that a few steps further, and we will actually be living in a 100% Google world of advertising relationship between the advertiser and the audience.
So are you arguing that the Justice Department should take a look at that?
No, because I don't think that I don't think it's wise, except in the era of net neutrality, to impose laws where there's not where things have not actually happened. And I'm just saying, if you took current trends, I actually believe that there will be more vibrant competition in the next years, and that in fact Google, while it's not going south, Google's not going to be the dominant. That's what if you nailed me, I would take the chance of that. So I don't definitely think that there should be government intervention at this point. So,
Arianna?
Well, I'm really glad to hear Barry say that, because one of the problems in this brave new world is that we really cannot predict the future. Just look back 5 years ago, and just to remind you, what did not exist 5 years ago? YouTube did not exist 5 years ago. MySpace, Facebook, even Google, not certainly in any way that we see it now. All those things did not exist. They were not part of our daily vocabulary or daily experience. So clearly, we cannot possibly know what 2012 is going to be like. And to try to control it now by bringing in the Justice Department or Viacom or all the people who are trying to basically stop the future is just completely insane. You know,
She used to be a liberal.
You know, if you look at the Terminator movie, you know, where Terminator meets Sarah Connor, I think that this is my prediction of the future. You know, at first it looked as though the Terminator was going to kill Sarah Connor, right? So if you look at the Terminator, in my metaphor, in my analogy, is online, right? And Sarah Connor is print. So in the end, Sarah Connor realized that the only way that she and her child could be saved is by embracing the Terminator. So that's really the hybrid future, kind of print. You know, come with me, he says with an Austrian accent, or you are dead. So,
Craig? Did you have
it's
something
just
you
a
want to say?
form factor, but anyway.
I agree about predicting the future. Way back when I was a very, very young nerd, I read science fiction, and as a result today I'm terribly bitter that there aren't lunar colonies, and I can't find my jetpack anywhere. We are seeing emergent phenomena come out of everywhere that we just didn't expect. A center of it is in this town around Broadway and Prince and Spring, where we have what I now call the Soho Blogplex, comprising a number of companies which are changing the way the web is working. There's Media Bistro, Gawker, Huffington Post, Daylife, Meetup, and if you stretch it to NYU, Jay Rosen has new assignment.net going, which is a new way to pay for investigative reporting. We do see some trends happening, and again, from my point of view, it's all matters. What matters is people getting together to get stuff done for social purposes. That's happening in unpredictable ways.
Before we all give each other a hug, let me just end with, in the 2.5 minutes we have left, with a question for each of you. In 5 years, 2012, start with you, Barry. What do you see as the biggest single change that you would expect?
Oh, me. What is the biggest single change?
Because of the Internet.
You know, I can't do a single change, Ken. I can't do
You want to do two?
We're in a radical, look, this is a radical revolution. So it's everything we see, hear, and know. We're in the very clutch of it. And now we're getting more bandwidth finally. And so in the next, I can't say 3, 5, 7 years, all this stuff's going to change up. So I don't have any big thing. I think what you'd say is that distribution, standard distribution, historical channels of distribution are going to get thrown into chaos.
Will people be watching movies or television programs or YouTube on their handheld devices?
I don't think anybody's going to watch particularly long-form programming unless they're in some ridiculously confined space on a little screen like this. We're getting screens that are bigger and bigger and bigger. The issue is not the form factor. It doesn't matter whether it's a screen this size or this size or this size, although this size is really great.
He's gotten a couple of plugs in here today, hasn't he?
I don't think it matters. I think what matters is that the way you get it is going to be completely different.
Arianna, biggest change?
I think the biggest change in terms of news is going to be in the way that now mainstream media have been suffering from attention deficit disorder. You know, they take a story, they cover it, and then they abandon it. There's going to be a change in that because of the blogosphere, because we are suffering from an obsessive-compulsive disorder. You know, we take a story and we drive it and drive it and drive it. And so a lot of major stories that have died on the front pages of newspapers are not going to die on the front pages of newspapers any longer, because the online media are going to be covering them and covering them and covering them until the mainstream media will have to go back and write about them again. Just one final thing that Jay Rosen said, and I think was brilliant, which is that often the blogosphere is like the court of appeals. The mainstream media decide the story is not important. The blogosphere decides it is important. It develops it, the mainstream media return to it, which is very good for democracy and very good for journalism.
Craig, quick thought.
Briefly, through new transparency in Washington via the net, we'll see the restoration of constitutional government. I think we'll see Mideast peace through social media, and possibly the beginning of the evolution of our machine overlords, which I eagerly anticipate, just on the record.
We're going to go out and do a hug now outside. Thank you.
Thank you all.